The wind howled through the canyons like a ghost that had long since forgotten its name. It dragged fine dust across the plains and rattled the loose wooden boards of Caleb Rourke's porch. He stood there, silent as stone, his weather-worn eyes staring past the rusted fence and the endless brown horizon beyond. The land was dry, the cattle thinner than ever, but he didn't care much. Not anymore. 10 years. That's how long it had been since he'd buried them. A wife with hair like the morning sun and a daughter who couldn't pronounce her own name yet. Taken in a week by the same sickness that spared him. Smallpox swept through their little corner of Arizona and left nothing but hollowed-out houses and silence. He had dug the graves himself behind the barn, where wildflowers used to grow. They didn't grow anymore. No one came up to Ghost Ridge anymore. That's what the locals called his ranch now. Ghost Ridge. Folks said the place was cursed. Some believed he'd gone mad, and maybe they were right. He talked to the wind sometimes. Saw his wife in dreams so vivid he'd wake up sweating, heart racing, tears already drying on his face. He had a mirror inside the house, but it hadn't seen his reflection in years. He didn't need a reminder of what grief had carved him into. The only things that moved on the ranch besides the cattle were the horses, and even they had grown nervous of late. Caleb had noticed it 2 weeks ago. Broken fences, paw prints near the chicken coop, tools moved, eggs missing. At first, he thought it might be coyotes. But coyotes don't unlatch pens. They don't stack kindling in neat little piles. And they sure as hell don't clean the horses' water troughs. Something or someone was on his land. Like this story so far, if it's pulling at something in your chest, or if you just love a good Wild West mystery, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories ride. Now, back to the tale. Caleb didn't go to town to report it. What would he say? He hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to anyone in years. And besides, he didn't need help. Not yet. He simply set up a crude snare behind the coop and waited. A man like him had nothing but time. That night, the wind was cruel. It ripped through the valley like a blade and slammed the shutters against the window frames until they threatened to fly off. Caleb didn't sleep. He hadn't truly slept in years, not without whiskey. He sat in his chair with a lantern burning low and his rifle across his lap, listening. When the trap snapped shut just after midnight, it was so sudden that even he jolted. He moved fast for a man his age, grabbing the rifle and storming into the darkness with the wind clawing at his coat. The clouds parted just enough for the moon to pour silver onto the earth, lighting his way. He reached the chicken coop, heart thudding, unsure what to expect. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't a thief, either. It was a girl, maybe 17, maybe younger. Hard to say under the dirt and tangled black hair that fell around her face like a wild mane. Her clothes were scraps of animal hide and torn cloth. Barefoot, bleeding from the ankle where the trap had caught her. But her eyes, God help him, her eyes weren't afraid. They were furious and fierce. She hissed when he approached, snapping her teeth like a cornered animal. "What the hell?" he whispered. She didn't speak, just growled and yanked against the trap. He lowered his rifle slightly. "You're hurt." No response. Caleb slowly crouched down, still holding the rifle. The girl's eyes followed every movement. She didn't blink once. "I'm gonna loosen that trap," he muttered. "You run. You'll tear your foot clean off." Still nothing. Just the rise and fall of her chest and the fire in her eyes. He moved slowly, carefully prying open the rusted steel jaws. Her foot slipped free. She didn't move. Not right away. Just flexed the ankle, testing it. When he backed away, she leapt up and limped backward, panting, watching him. He didn't stop her. He just stood there, feeling something strange turn in his chest. She didn't run. She didn't vanish into the night. Instead, she backed herself toward the barn and collapsed just inside the open door. The next morning, she was still there. He found her curled in the straw, still bleeding. A coyote would have made a meal of her if it weren't for the dogs. But the dogs hadn't barked. That alone gave him pause. They always barked. Always. He brought water. She drank. He brought bread. She didn't touch it until he walked away. When he came back, the bread was gone. For days, the routine stayed the same. He didn't ask questions, and she didn't answer them. She limped, but she worked. Cleaned the troughs. Gathered eggs. Brushed the horses with care that rivaled his own. Like she knew how. Like she'd done it before. And yet, she never spoke. Sometimes, he'd catch her staring at the mountains in the distance. Her expression would change. Not softer, but sad. Like she was searching for something, or someone. She slept in the barn. He offered the house once, pointing without speaking, but she shook her head so hard it was almost violent. So he stopped asking. One night, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, he heard humming. Not a bird, not the wind, her. The girl was humming something soft, rhythmic, haunting. He didn't say a word, just listened. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, she brought him coffee. He stared at the chipped mug in her outstretched hand like it was an offering from the heavens. He took it, nodded once. "Thank you." She tilted her head. Then, with that same soft fire in her eyes, she whispered, "Nalanai." It was the first word she ever said. "Is that your name?" She didn't answer, just repeated it once more. "Nalanai." And then she walked away. From that day, something shifted. She started coming to the porch more often, sat a few feet away, never too close, watched him as he fixed tools or carved wood. Sometimes, she mimicked him, grabbing scraps and shaping them, poorly at first, then better. She had quick hands and sharper eyes. When he left for the valley to mend a busted fence, she followed. Didn't ask, just came along, walking slightly behind, limping less than before. When he mounted his horse to check the far pasture, she surprised him by climbing on another, bareback, and riding like she'd been born to do it. That spooked him. "Who taught you to ride like that?" She didn't respond. He stopped asking. At night, he began leaving scraps of old letters out for her. His wife's writing, his daughter's drawings. He didn't know why. Maybe to make her understand. Maybe to fill the silence. She never said a word about them, but he once saw her holding a sketch, one his daughter had drawn when she was 3, and tracing it with her fingertip like it meant something. One morning, he found her at the graveyard. She stood between the 2 stones, her head bowed, hands clenched. He approached slowly. "She was almost your age," he murmured. "My daughter." Nalanai looked up. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It shattered him. That night, he drank until he couldn't remember the floor from the ceiling. When he woke, the house was clean. Firewood stacked. Water boiled. And Nalanai sitting in the chair across from him, watching. "Why re you helping me?" he rasped. She looked down at her hands. Then said, almost too quietly to hear, "Because you didn't shoot me." He chuckled bitterly. "I should have. Might have saved myself the trouble." But she didn't laugh. She just tilted her head again and said, "You saved me." That night he couldn't sleep. Not because of the whiskey or the wind, but because of the ache in his chest. One he hadn't felt in a long time. Not pain, not sorrow, hope. And hope was dangerous. 2 days later, he returned from town with more supplies than usual. New boots, a blanket, soap, a comb. He didn't say they were for her. He just left them on the barn step. She didn't say thank you, but she used every single item. Caleb caught himself whistling once, and it startled him. He hadn't made music in a decade. The ranch came alive in strange ways. The chickens laid more eggs. The cattle stayed calm. Even the wild horses at the edge of his property started creeping closer. One day, he watched Nalanai walk up to a spooked colt that no one could get near. She placed her palm on its forehead and whispered something in Apache. The colt didn't bolt. He felt his breath catch. Not just at the moment, but at the sudden realization that he had no idea who this girl really was. Where had she learned all this? Why did she come to his ranch? And why did it feel like she belonged here? More than he ever had. That night, he found something outside his door. Carved figurine. Rough, wooden, shaped like a woman with a child in her arms. He He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked out at the stars, the ranch, the barn glowing faintly in the moonlight. And for the first time since he buried his family, Caleb Rourke whispered a prayer. Not for the past, but for whatever was coming. The sky cracked open just after dawn. Lightning split the clouds, not in anger but in warning, and the first drops of rain in months began to tap softly against the cracked earth. Caleb Rourke stood in the doorway of his weather-beaten house, a steaming mug in hand, eyes fixed on the barn where the girl now slept. He hadn't heard her stir yet, but he knew she was awake. Nalanai was always up before the sun. The rain felt like a blessing. The air cooled, the land breathed, and even the cattle huddled against the fence seemed less haunted. Caleb exhaled slowly and took a long sip from his mug. The bitterness of the coffee was comforting. Familiar, predictable. Everything else in his life now wasn't. He couldn't quite explain it, even to himself. There was something about her presence that stirred things in him he had long buried. Nalanai didn't just remind him of his daughter. She reminded him of himself before he turned to stone. She was wild but disciplined, quiet but impossible to ignore. In her silence, she screamed more than most people ever said. Yesterday, he'd found her standing barefoot in the creek, eyes closed, arms stretched out like she was speaking to the wind. He had watched from a distance, unsure if it was a prayer, a ritual, or just a moment of peace. Today, something felt different. He made his way to the barn, boots squelching softly in the mud. The rain had picked up, steady now, the kind that soaked you before you realized you were wet. As he pushed the heavy door open, he saw her standing there in the loft, staring out through the broken slats at the rain. "I thought you hated being indoors," he said. She didn't turn. "The rain smells like home." He paused. It was the most she'd said in a single breath. "Where's home?" he asked gently. "Gone," she replied. He didn't press. He knew what that answer meant, knew it too well. She came down the ladder like a whisper and stood in front of him, her face damp with mist, her long black hair tangled like wind-blown vines. She held something in her hand, a bundle wrapped in old deer hide. "I want to show you something," she said. Caleb stared at the bundle, then at her. He hesitated, then nodded. She led him into the house. It was the first time she stepped foot inside. He said nothing, just moved aside and let her in. She sat at the table, unwrapping the bundle slowly, carefully. Inside were small objects. Bones, feathers, beads, a strip of fabric stained with what looked like dried blood. She laid them out one by one. "This was my mother's," she said, holding up the strip. "She tied it in my hair when we ran." Caleb's throat tightened. He didn't interrupt. "The soldiers came before dawn. We thought we were far enough from the fort, but they found us, burned our camp, shot the men first." Her voice didn't tremble. It was flat, cold, like she had told this story before, many times to herself. "My mother took me into the rocks, told me not to cry, told me if they caught her I had to run. So I ran." Caleb stared at the table, at the bones and beads like artifacts from another world. "I was 8, she said. "I didn't speak for 2 years." His eyes flicked to hers, searching for something to say, but there was nothing. What words could carry the weight of that kind of past? "I found an old woman in the hills. She taught me how to survive. I stayed with her until last winter. Then she died. I buried her under a cedar tree and walked." He looked at her, this half-wild, half-broken soul who had wandered into his life like a forgotten echo. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "There's nothing to go back to." She gathered the items back into the bundle and tied it shut. "But there's something here." He blinked. "Here." She nodded slowly. "This place. You." Caleb couldn't hold her gaze. He stood and moved to the stove, stoking the coals even though the heat wasn't needed. His hands trembled. "I'm not the man you think I am," he muttered. "I know exactly what kind of man you are," she said from behind him. The rain slammed harder against the roof. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. He turned slowly. "Then you know I can't protect you. Not from what's coming." "What's coming?" she asked. He walked to the back room and returned with a folded newspaper, tossed it on the table. She opened it. A headline, a notice, a bounty. Her name, Nalani, fugitive, wanted for harboring a traitor Apache scout. Armed, dangerous, reward, $300. Her hands trembled, but her eyes burned. "They think I helped my uncle," she whispered. "Did you?" She looked up. "I helped him die with dignity." Caleb ran a hand over his face. "Someone saw you. Word got to town. The bounty hunters will come soon. They're not interested in justice, just the money." She nodded once. "Then we prepare." That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He packed supplies, checked the rifles, oiled the old revolver he hadn't touched in years. Nalani sharpened a blade she'd carved herself. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. They knew the language of survival. By morning, the storm had passed, but the air was heavy with dread. Caleb saddled the horses, strapped on the old saddlebag from his army days, and loaded up extra cartridges. "I'll ride into town," he said. "Get eyes on the situation." She shook her head. "It's too late for that. They're already here." He froze. "How do you know?" She pointed to the ridge above the creek. A figure stood there, still, watching, then disappeared. Caleb swore under his breath. "They're testing us." "Let them," she said. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was something else entirely. They set traps that afternoon. Deadfall snares near the back trail. Tripwires in the barn. Broken glass buried beneath the window ledge. Caleb had always kept to himself, but now he used every bit of knowledge war had burned into him. By nightfall, the ranch was quiet again. The cattle were uneasy, the dogs silent. They waited, and then it came, the sharp crack of a branch. A silhouette at the edge of the barn. A soft, deliberate footstep on gravel. Caleb raised his rifle, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Then the voice came. "Easy now, old man. We just want the girl." 3 men stepped into view. Dusty hats, long coats, guns drawn. "She's not here," Caleb lied. "Sure she is." The lead man grinned. "We seen her. She's got a price on her head, and we aim to collect." Caleb took 1 step forward. "Turn around." The man laughed. "You gonna shoot me, old-timer? For some Apache stray?" Then came a sound none of them expected. A low, sharp whistle. Before the men could turn, one of the tripwires snapped, and a heavy plank came swinging down from the rafters, smashing into the second man's skull. He crumpled without a word. The third spun around just in time for Nalani to leap from the loft, blade flashing. She slashed his forearm and kicked the gun from his hand before tumbling to the ground like a cat. The lead man aimed his revolver at her. Caleb fired first. The man's body jerked violently and collapsed in a heap. Blood soaked into the dirt. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Nalani stood slowly, panting, her blade red. Caleb lowered his rifle, hands shaking. "You okay?" She nodded. Then, from the shadows, another voice. "I wouldn't move if I were you." 4th man. The lookout from the ridge. He held a shotgun pointed straight at Caleb's chest. "Drop it." Caleb hesitated. "Drop it." He let the rifle fall. Nalani shifted slightly, stepping closer. The man sneered. "You should have stayed a ghost, old man. Now you're gonna die for a cause that was never yours." Caleb looked him in the eye. "Sometimes it's not about the cause. Sometimes it's about the people." He glanced at Nalani. The man raised the shotgun. Then something incredible happened. The colt, the same wild colt Nalani had tamed, charged from the shadows and slammed into the man's side, knocking him off balance. The shotgun roared into the sky. Nalani moved like wind and lightning, burying the blade in his thigh before he could recover. He screamed. Caleb rushed forward, grabbed the shotgun, and turned it on him. "Get off my land," he growled. The man crawled away, limping, bleeding. The others didn't move. They weren't breathing. When it was over, Caleb sat on the porch steps, his hands covered in dirt, sweat, and blood. The rain had started again. gentle now, cleansing. Nalani sat beside him. Neither spoke. After a long silence, she whispered, "I should go." He turned to her. "Go where?" "They'll come again. More of them." "Let them," he said. She looked at him with wide, questioning eyes. "This is your home now," he said. Her lips trembled. "I've never had one." "You do now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Carved figurine, rough, wooden. A woman holding a child. He handed it to her. She stared at it for a long time, then closed her fingers around it. "I remember this," she whispered. Caleb froze. "What did you say?" She looked up at him. "I used to dream about this. When I was little. I thought I made it up." His heart slammed against his ribs. He hadn't told her about the figurine's origin. Hadn't said it was carved by his wife for their daughter. His voice cracked. "What else do you remember?" She closed her eyes. "A smell, lavender. A song, something soft. And a face. Yours. When you were young." He stared at her. The storm forgotten. The world forgotten. "Nalani," he said slowly. "What was your mother's name?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Sarah." The world tilted. Caleb's vision blurred. His hands shook. Sarah. His wife's name. His child had never died. She had lived, taken, raised, returned, home. The wind had changed. It didn't whistle anymore. It howled, dragging grit and memories across the land like a whip. Caleb Rourke sat on the edge of the porch with his fingers knotted tightly around a small wooden carving. The same one he'd made over a decade ago for a baby girl who had disappeared with a fever and a scream. A baby girl he buried in spirit, if not in flesh. And now she sat beside him, silent as ever, tracing the edge of the same carving with the tip of her thumb. Nalani, Clara. He wasn't sure which name to use, or even which one belonged to her more. The truth had settled on the ranch like a dust storm, thick, disorienting, painful. She was his daughter, his Clara, taken, not dead, raised by the very people the army had tried to erase. She had survived when he had surrendered, fought when he had wept. She had returned, but not as the child he'd lost. She'd returned as someone else entirely. And now they were both wanted. Word had spread fast. The bodies of the bounty hunters had been found 2 days later by a passing rider. No lawman had come yet, but the saloons in town were thick with whispers. The ghost rancher and the Apache girl. Blood on their hands. Lawless. Dangerous. Worth money. Caleb had heard the gossip from a boy at the general store, the only soul in town who still dared speak to him. The boy handed over the supplies and said, "They're comin' for ya, mister. Said they'll burn you both out if they have to." Caleb had nodded, then left without a word. Now he watched the horizon with the rifle across his lap. Inside the house, Nalani sat by the fire, wrapping herbs and old cloth around her blade's handle. She hadn't spoken since the revelation. She hadn't needed to. Her presence alone said more than words ever could. Sometimes, when she didn't know he was watching, she'd study the walls of the house, her old house, with something unreadable in her eyes. She had vague flashes of this place, she'd said. The scent of lavender, the creak of a particular floorboard, the lullaby her mother used to sing. And yet, she had no memory of his voice, no memory of the man he used to be. He couldn't blame her. He barely remembered that man either. But there was no time for rebuilding what they had lost. Not yet. The storm was coming fast. That evening, just before dusk, a rider came to the edge of the property. Caleb saw the dust first. A single plume winding down the trail. He stood and raised the rifle but didn't aim. The rider wasn't hiding. He came slow, hands raised, face young and open. "I ain't here to fight," the boy called out. Caleb said nothing, just waited. The boy stopped 10 paces from the gate, lifted his hat. "My name's Micah Tolley. My pa owns the feed store in town. I overheard some men in the saloon." Caleb still didn't lower the rifle. "They're coming tomorrow," the boy said. 6 or 7 of them, ex-soldiers. They got dynamite. Said if the girl's here, they're gonna take the whole place down. Caleb's fingers tightened around the stock. "Why are you telling me this?" Micah looked nervous. "Because it ain't right. She didn't do nothing. And folks around here used to speak well of you, before you went quiet." He tossed a small pouch to the ground. It landed with a dull clink. "Ammo. Figured you'd need it." Then he turned his horse and rode off, kicking up dust behind him like a shadow fleeing the light. Caleb picked up the pouch. .44 rounds. Fresh. He walked back to the house slowly, each step heavier than the last. "They're coming," he said when he stepped inside. Nal and I didn't flinch, just looked up, steady as a mountain. "Then we fight." Caleb shook his head. "No, we leave." She stood. "This is our home." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "No, this is a graveyard. I lived here waiting to die. You brought me back, but that don't mean I want you buried with me." "I'm not leaving," she said. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her shoulders. "You don't understand. These aren't just bounty men. These are men like me, broken men, war men. They won't care who you are. They just want to watch the world burn." Her eyes filled with something bright. Not tears. Fire. "I've run my whole life," she said. "I'm tired." "So am I," he whispered. She looked down at his hands. Calloused, scarred, shaking. Then softly, she said, "You're not alone anymore." That night they prepared. Caleb showed her how to rig the dynamite to explode only when the front gate was crossed. She showed him how to hide in the earth. Shallow pits lined with brush. They dug trenches, set lines, blocked the barn door with sandbags and stacked crates. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind could have been death, but they moved like ghosts in the dark, working without rest. Just before dawn, they sat together by the fire, each lost in their own silence. Caleb reached for his old leather journal. It had sat untouched for years. He opened it, took a pencil, and began to write. "To whoever finds this place." He paused, looked at her. She was already watching him. He closed the book and slid it into her pack. "If I fall," he said, "you run." "No," she replied. "I mean it." She didn't speak again, just reached over and placed her hand over his. When the sun rose, it was red, the kind of red that makes cattle uneasy and dogs go silent, the kind of red that foretells death. The first sound was the crack of a whip. No horse, just the dry snap of tension. Then the rhythmic pounding of hooves, dust rising from the trail like smoke. 7 men rode in. Caleb recognized the lead rider, Thatcher Cole, a name that tasted like ash in his mouth. A former Union captain who'd turned bounty after the war, known for leaving no one alive, not even children. Caleb had served with him once, then left in disgust after seeing what Cole did to a village near Santa Fe. And now he was here, grinning like a wolf, fire in his eyes. "Well, I'll be damned," Cole called out. Caleb Rourke, hiding in the hills like some scared little rat. "You got soft out here." Caleb stood just behind the gate, rifle aimed. "You came for blood, Cole. Best bring your own coffin." Cole laughed. "Just give us the girl. Won't be no trouble." Caleb raised the rifle higher. "She's under my protection." "That's so?" Cole leaned forward in his saddle. "You protecting her like you protected that family in '63? A cold sweat trickled down Caleb's back. "You say another word and I drop you where you stand." Cole smirked. "You always had a weakness for lost causes, Rourke. Let's see how long you last this time." He raised his hand. The men charged. The world exploded. The first rider hit the tripwire and vanished in a blast of fire and smoke. The second was thrown from his horse when a pit gave way beneath him. The third screamed as a hidden nail spike tore through his boot and into his leg. Caleb fired once, twice. Men fell. Blood stained the dirt. Then they were inside the gate. Cole came through like a bull, gun blazing. Caleb ducked behind the porch post, firing back. Splinters flew. The house shook. Nalanai was nowhere to be seen. He prayed she had fled. Then he heard a scream. Not from her, but from one of the men. He turned in time to see Nalanai drop from the loft of the barn, knives in both hands. She moved like lightning, like vengeance made flesh. She cut one man down before the others even saw her. Caleb shouted, "Get down!" He lit the second fuse and rolled the dynamite toward the barn entrance just as Cole aimed his revolver at her. The explosion threw them both back. Flames danced in the barn's doorway. Smoke curled like fingers into the sky. Caleb scrambled up, coughing, ears ringing. He saw her, cut, bleeding, crawling away from the wreckage. Cole was down, but moving. Caleb ran to him, gun in hand. "You should have stayed dead," Cole spat, lifting his pistol. They fired at the same time. Caleb staggered. Cole dropped. Silence, except for the crackle of fire and the moaning of wounded horses. Caleb collapsed to his knees. Nalani crawled to him, blood on her brow, hands trembling. "You're hit," she said. He shook his head. Not bad, but it was bad. He could feel the warmth in his side, the way the world tilted slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He laughed weakly. "For what?" "For leaving," she said. He reached up and cupped her face, streaked with dirt and ash. "You came back. That's all that matters." She sobbed. Finally, the sound tearing through the smoky air like a bell. "I don't want to lose you," she cried. "You won't," he whispered, but he didn't know if that was true. The sun rose higher, and the buzzards circled overhead. The ranch was ruined. The men were dead. But the girl, the woman, the daughter was alive. And in that moment, as the blood seeped into the dust, Caleb Rourke knew he had found something greater than redemption. He had found purpose, and as long as she lived, his fight wasn't over. The pain came in waves. It started as a dull pulse in Caleb's side, then swelled into a red-hot surge that took his breath with every heartbeat. His hand was pressed against the wound, warm blood seeping through his fingers. The world spun above him, sky swirling in lazy circles, the sun burning too bright. He could barely hear over the ringing in his ears, but he felt her hands on him. Urgent, desperate. Nalani's voice was distant at first, muffled as if underwater. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes. Papa, please." That word pierced deeper than the bullet. He hadn't heard it in over a decade. And now, as the blood leaked from his body, it came not as an accusation, not as a dream, but as a lifeline. "I'm here," he croaked. "Still here." She pressed harder on the wound. Her hands were trembling, stained crimson, her breath coming in short, broken gasps. The barn behind them still smoked, embers glowing orange in the blackened ruins. The smell of ash and gunpowder clung to the air. "I need to get you inside," she said. "I can't stop the bleeding out here." Caleb tried to nod but only managed a grimace. She grabbed his arms and, with strength that defied her size, dragged him across the dirt, step by step, until they reached the porch. She kicked the door open with her bare foot and pulled him in, grunting with each tug. She got him to the table and slid him onto the bench, then ran to the cabinets. Caleb heard jars clatter, metal clink. The world was going dark around the edges. He blinked rapidly, fighting it. "Tell me what to do," she begged, returning with a bottle and cloth. "I don't know if it's deep. I can't see." Caleb reached weakly for the bottle. "Whiskey," he rasped. "Pour it." She did, into the wound, into his mouth. He gasped, biting down on the leather strap she gave him. The fire inside him flared and then dulled, replaced by a deep, spreading ache. "You've done this before?" she asked. He nodded faintly. "Too many times." He didn't say it, but this one felt different. Worse. Final. She cleaned the wound, wrapped it tight, and lit a fire to warm the room. The wind howled outside, dragging smoke from the battlefield into the sky. It carried the smell of death far across the valley. Hours passed. Caleb drifted in and out. When he opened his eyes again, she was sitting by the bed, her knees pulled to her chest, the carving still clutched in her hand. "You should sleep," he murmured. She looked at him, eyes swollen and tired. "So should you." He smiled faintly. "Hard to do with a bullet in your side. You said it wasn't bad." "I lied," She crawled to the edge of the bed and placed the carving on the nightstand. "You're going to be fine. You've survived worse, haven't you?" He didn't answer. He just stared at her face, trying to memorize it. Every angle, every shadow, every echo of the woman who'd given birth to her. She looked so much like her mother it hurt, but there was something more in her. A strength neither he nor Sarah ever had. A fire that had been tempered by survival, not love. "Nalani," he said softly. "Or is it Clara now?" She hesitated. "I don't know." He nodded slowly. "That's all right." She reached for his hand and held it. "Do you remember what I sounded like? As a baby?" He laughed. A dry, broken sound. Like a bird with a cough, always trying to sing. She smiled. "I think I remember that. A song. Not the words, just the sound." Caleb's eyes glazed for a moment. "Your mother used to sing you to sleep every night. She made up a lullaby. I never could remember the melody, but you'd hum it back in your sleep." Silence settled between them, heavy with what might have been. She lowered her head. "I want to know everything. About her. About you. But I'm afraid there's no time." "There is," he whispered. "There's always time for the truth." She stayed beside him through the night. He told her stories in between fits of pain. Stories of her mother's laugh, her garden of purple irises, the way she used to dance when no one was looking. He spoke of the war, of the letters that never came, of the moment he returned and found a grave that wasn't hers and a baby that wasn't there. "I searched the whole valley," he said. "I thought maybe someone had taken you, but I couldn't prove it. The fever had torn through everyone. No one knew anything. And the army, God, they didn't care. They just moved on. I was taken by a scout," she whispered. "Not out of cruelty." He said it was mercy. "He found me crying beside my mother's body, covered in fever sweat. He thought I'd die too, but I didn't. Because you were stronger than all of us," Caleb said. Outside, the sky bled orange with the coming dawn. Smoke still hung in the distance, but the danger had passed. For now. And yet, Caleb knew the fire had only been the beginning. The next threat wouldn't come with guns or dynamite. It would come with law, with badges, with noose and ink and gavel. They would call it justice, and it would come for them both. Later that day, the boy from town, Micah, returned. He was pale, nervous, and covered in dust. "I told you I'd come back," he said. "They know what happened. The sheriff's coming. With a marshal. Maybe more." "How long?" Caleb asked, sitting up with difficulty. Micah shook his head. "A day. Maybe 2. Are they after her or me?" "Both." Caleb looked at Nalani. She stood in the doorway, her hands on her hips, eyes steady. "You need to go," Micah said. "Now." "I'm not running again," she said. Micah looked at her like she was insane. "They'll hang you, girl. Doesn't matter if you're innocent. They'll say you killed white men. And you," he turned to Caleb, "they'll say you harbored a fugitive. You shot lawmen. Doesn't matter if it was self-defense." "Then we tell the truth," Nalani said. Micah scoffed. "The truth doesn't matter out here. Only who gets there first to tell it." Caleb sighed. "He's right." She stared at him. "So what do we do?" He looked toward the hills, toward the smoke, the memory. "We take the truth to them," he said. They left that night, under a sliver of moon. Caleb rode slow, his body barely holding together, each bump in the trail a fresh wave of pain. Nalani rode beside him, her blade at her side, her eyes scanning the horizon. They reached the edge of town by morning. The streets were quiet, too quiet. Shops shuttered, curtains drawn. The sheriff's office loomed at the far end of Main Street like a tombstone. Micah waited near the blacksmith's shed. "They're in there," he said. "Sheriff Dawson and 2 marshals from Santa Fe. They're waiting on backup." "No backup coming," Caleb said. "We end it now." Micah looked between them. "You sure about this?" Nalani dismounted. "It ends today, one way or another." They walked together, father and daughter, ghost and flame. The doors of the sheriff's office swung open as they approached. 3 men stepped out, rifles in hand, badges glinting. "Stay where you are," one barked. Caleb didn't flinch. "My name is Caleb Rourke," he said, voice clear. "This is my daughter, Clara. She was taken from me 14 years ago. We are here to tell the truth, not to fight." The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "Truth? You think truth will stop a bullet?" "We'll see," Caleb said. The marshal stepped forward. "You're both wanted for murder." "She was defending herself," Caleb said. "They came to kill her. They weren't deputies. They were bounty men, criminals." "Still dead," the marshal said. "So are the men who burned her village, who left her mother in pieces, who turned my baby girl into a fugitive." Nalani stepped forward. "My name is Clara Rourke. I was taken by a government scout during a forced relocation. Raised in hiding. I did nothing wrong." The town was watching now. Doors creaked open. Faces peeked through windows. The story was unfolding, and the dust was stirring. The sheriff looked at the marshal. The marshal looked at Clara. Then he lowered his rifle. "I don't know what's true anymore," he said. "But I know fear when I see it. And you don't look afraid." "I'm not," she said. "Not anymore." The sheriff spoke next. "This isn't over. You'll have to testify. A judge will want answers." "I'll give them," Caleb said. "But I'm not hiding anymore. Neither is she." The tension broke like a fever. People stepped outside. No one cheered, but no one shot. Micah exhaled in relief. Caleb sagged in his saddle. And Clara and Nalani stood like a mountain, unbroken. They stayed in town that night at the edge of civilization, not as fugitives, but as people reclaiming their names. Caleb wrote again in his journal, "Tomorrow we start over, not as ghosts, but as flesh and blood, as father and daughter." He didn't know what would come next, but for the first time he was ready to live again, even if there were scars, even if there were trials, because the past had been survived, and the future at last was theirs to build. If the story stirred something in you, if you felt the pain, the fight, and the power of that final reunion, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to the channel for more untold tales from the Wild West that blend truth, emotion, and unbelievable twists. Like, share, and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done if you were in Caleb's boots? Because in the Wild West, every man carries a story, and some stories refuse to die. See you in the next one, partner.